Clara, the daughter-in-law, was in deep pain as her mother-in-law, tearfully pleading, asked for medicine. Clara just stared at the $5,000 in her hand, the money her husband David sent every month from Seattle for his mother's medicines. At first, Clara spent the money responsibly, buying the prescribed medicines and caring for her mother-in-law. But one day, a strange voice inside her heart made her question how long she would keep sacrificing for others without a life of her own. That day, she decided the money would be spent as she wished. She bought a new dress in her favorite color, something she had never allowed herself before due to the medicine budget. Returning home from shopping, she felt no guilt, just happiness. When her sister-in-law Sarah, who was like a sister to her, remarked about the money meant for the medicines, Clara laughed it off, saying, "What harm if Mom skips her meds for a few days? Everyone needs to live for themselves sometimes." Sarah supported her silently. Months passed. Clara spent the money on herself and little gifts for her brother-in-law and Sarah, ignoring her mother-in-law's worsening health. When her mother-in-law finally weekly asked for her medicine, Clara pretended not to hear. One day, while carrying shopping bags full of new clothes and cosmetics, Clara met a wandering old man begging quietly. She tried to give him some money, but he angrily slapped the money from her hand, warning her, "Go home, your end is near." Terrified, Clara rushed home to find her mother-in-law lifeless. The realization of what she had done crushed her. Back when she first began spending the money selfishly, Sarah had taken her to a salon where Clara felt like a heroine, praised for the first time and lost in a new world, forgetting her mother-in-law's suffering. Life went on with Clara feeling free, enjoying new clothes, watches, and outings, while her mother-in-law silently endured pain in a corner. One evening, after shopping and dining with Sarah, Clara met the old man again. This time, he refused her money, looked into her eyes with fierce intensity, and warned again, "Go home, your time has come." Shocked and angry, Clara threw the money down and chased him away, but his words and presence left her heart heavy and the bright market lights painfully sharp in her eyes as she sat silently in the car, staring out the window. Still, he treated me that way. Strange people exist in this world. I said nothing, just took a deep breath and, without knowing why, said that sometimes people say things to us that we just can't understand. I didn't know why I said that. Then there was traffic, and we had to wait about half an hour. Small children came to the car window, waving their hands, some selling toys, some handkerchiefs, some snacks, but I didn't even look at any of them. My sister-in-law Emma was busy on her phone, and I was lost in my thoughts. When we got home, I quietly took off my shoes and went straight to my room, placing the shopping bags on the bed but didn't feel like opening them. When I washed my face and looked in the mirror, something felt strange, the same makeup, same clothes, same face, but now with a different mark, like a shadow left behind that no water could wash away. Then Emma opened the door and asked if I wanted some tea. I said no, I just wanted to rest. She said I had become completely silent, and asked if the old man's words had affected me. I only nodded. At dinner, I was quiet too. My brother David asked if everything was okay. I said I was just a little tired. There was no sound from Mom's room, the door was closed. Emma said Mom hadn't made a sound or asked for medicine all day. I carelessly replied maybe she was just tired and we'd see in the morning. That night, I had trouble sleeping. The old man kept appearing in my dreams repeating, "Go home, your time has come." Sometimes he stood in the dark, sometimes appeared in Mom's room, and I tried to avoid him every time. I woke up sweating. Days passed normally, but a strange unease grew inside me. Whenever I went to the market, I remembered that face. Seeing any old beggar made my heart race. I asked Emma if she had ever seen that old beggar before. She said no, never before or after. I even went back to look for him, checking every street and corner, but he was nowhere to be found, like he had vanished into the ground. I asked other beggars nearby if an old bearded man sat here, but a woman said no such man came here. I returned quietly but felt something had latched onto me, like a shadow, a silent message that wasn't fully revealed yet. I didn't realize then that the words he spoke were not just words but the beginning of something big. That day when I came home and opened the door, an eerie silence greeted me, no voice of Emma, no groans from Mom, no chatter from David, everything was frozen. I put my bag on the sofa, took off my shoes, and headed to the kitchen for water but stopped at the door. David stood there, looking down, eyes moist. He looked at me but said nothing. My heart trembled. I asked what was wrong, why was everyone so quiet? He avoided my eyes and said, just go inside Mom's room. A jolt hit me and I hurried to the room. Opening the door slowly, I saw a sight that stopped my breath. Mom was lying perfectly still on the cot, face peaceful but eyes forever closed. My husband David was sitting near her feet, bent over with tears flowing continuously. He had come back suddenly from out of town without any message, and now before me lay a dead body and a silent accusation. I froze at the threshold, heart pounding. David lifted his head, our eyes met, and then he looked down again. You came, he said, as if something inside him broke. I asked with difficulty when it happened. Last night, alone, without medicine, was all he said. I stood silent, and Emma came into the room, adjusting Mom's hands under the sheet. David lowered his gaze. Everything seemed to freeze. My husband came to me. His face showed not just anger or sorrow but a hopelessness of a broken man. He said, Clara, you had time, money, everything. Except one thing, conscience. I tried to speak but my tongue wouldn't obey. He raised his hand, don't say anything. It's all clear. I don't need to hear more. He went back to Mom's file of old prescriptions and threw it at me, saying, look, every month's medicines are here, doctor's prescriptions and reports. Did you ever feel the need to see all this? I bent down, picking up the scattered papers. One had detailed records of Mom's illness. One of the papers had the dates when money was sent every month, and another had the receipt for the last medicine, which was several months old. In a trembling voice, David said, my mother kept dying, and you bought shoes, purses, makeup, and all that. I just thought I could say this much, but he replied, you only thought, when did you have time to think? You were busy in markets, parlors, taking pictures. You never thought my mother was alone, in pain, suffering, dying. Summoning my courage, I said, just give me one chance, please. He raised his hand to stop me and said, you had your chances. I gave you every chance. Every month, I sent money trusting you. Now nothing is left. You're not just my wife, you're also my mother's killer. And a killer can never be the honor of my house. Without looking at me, his voice pierced my chest. My brother, Jake, stood at the door. My sister-in-law, Sarah, was behind him. No one spoke, only silence, and in that silence, I was completely alone. Their quietness became the biggest proof against me. It felt like walls were closing in, making it harder to breathe. Then he said, pack your things and leave right now. Holding my heart tight, I asked, where will I go? He said, I don't know. Go wherever you want. But don't come back to my door. I looked around slowly. The house where I was once a wife, a daughter-in-law, the mistress of the home, had turned into a place where I was now a stranger. Silently, I opened the closet, took out 2 sets of clothes, and packed a small bag. I left my jewelry behind, wanting to ask if I could take it, but thought silence was better to save my dignity. As I walked out with the bag, David stepped aside and said, close the door yourself. I don't want to see your face again. I glanced at Sarah, whose eyes showed softness and pity, but she said nothing. Jake avoided my gaze. No one spoke. Opening the door, the outside world felt alien. The sun was setting, but for me, the light was gone. I looked back once more at the door through which I had happily stepped out many times, now the same door pushing me out in disgrace. I stood outside for a few moments, feeling the walls around me staring. A neighbor peeked through her curtain and then quietly lowered it. I gripped my bag tightly and walked toward the street. The roads were few, the burden heavy. I didn't know where to go or where to stop. Then I thought of my parents' house but hesitated, would they accept me now? Jake had said at the wedding, Clara, you mean everything to us. That same brother, that same door, haunted my mind. At the bus stop, I sat on a bench trying to gather myself. A gentle breeze blew, but the emptiness inside was colder. A woman came and sat beside me, asking, "Sister, are you okay? You seem troubled." I just nodded, unable to speak. Then I took out my phone. David's number was on the screen. My finger hovered over it. My heart said call him once, maybe he'll listen, maybe call me back, but the thought was instantly pushed away. He had said I was his mother's killer. I closed the phone and put it back in my bag. Just then, an auto rickshaw arrived. I got in tiredly and gave the driver Jake's address. He didn't ask anything else. The car moved forward. All I had was my bag and an emptiness inside, a question spinning in my mind: was this the consequence of my own actions? This fate that had become my destiny. As I stepped into the street, childhood voices echoed in my ears, the same walls, the same door where my mother used to hold me and oil my hair. Now everything felt foreign. Bag in hand, shoes dusty, travel weariness on my clothes. Fear in my heart, but also hope that maybe my parents' door was still open to me, a place where I could at least find shelter. I knocked lightly, then a little louder. My sister-in-law, Sarah, appeared at the door. Surprise and coldness flashed across her face. We stood silent for a few moments. Fighting tears, I said, "Just let me stay a few days. I'm very tired. Broken." She looked aside as if waiting for permission, then softly said, "Your brother David isn't home." I asked, "Where are Mom and Dad?" She said, "Mom went to the temple, and Dad is in the neighborhood." Then she asked, "But why have you come here?" Her question shook the ground beneath me. I tried to explain, "Things aren't right. My husband left me." Before I finished, she said, "Now you need our home." Tears rolled down my cheeks as I broke down. "I did everything for you all, bought a shop for my brother, gave you gifts, sacrificed my happiness every time." She stepped closer and said, "Yes, you did. But that was your husband's money, not from your heart. You didn't do a favor." My eyelids drooped as if a bond inside had snapped and fallen apart. I whispered, "Just a few days. Then I'll find a job, do some work. I just need a roof now." At that moment, a voice came from inside. "Who is it?" It was my younger brother's voice. I called out, "Brother, it's me, Clara." He came to the door, looked at me, and stood with his head bowed. He said, "You? We're not in a position to give anyone space here, especially not a sister who couldn't stay with her husband." I stepped back, tears welling up. I said softly, "I did everything for you, all the shop, the decorations, everything." Coldly, he replied, "That doesn't mean we'll be indebted to you forever." Then sharply said, "Sarah, stop. No need to say more. Close the door. People are watching." The door was half closed, but I folded my hands once more and said, "Please, just one night. Just one night, I'll leave in the morning." He said no. "This is my final decision. There's no place for you here now. You made your own choices, now you must face the consequences." The door began to close. I put my hand on it and said, "Call Dad. Let me talk to Mom." He said, "Don't embarrass them. They already face enough questions. If you come here, people will question us too." Slowly, I pulled my hand back and the door shut. Silence came from inside. I stood there like a stone for a few moments. Kids played in the street. One child fell after a stumble, and his mother ran to him. For a moment, I wondered if anyone would ever run to me like that. I quietly sat down on a bench as the evening shadows grew longer and streetlights flickered on. I didn't know where to go next, my phone had no balance, and my mind was blank. Just then, an old friend, maybe recognizing me, stopped and asked if I was okay. I nodded and said I was going through a tough time. She said she had no place to offer but knew of a spot near the church where I could spend the night. I thanked her and said I'd see. Alone again, memories of my childhood street, my mom's house, and my brother's laughter haunted me, but now the doors to both the house and relationships were shut tight, leaving silence not just in the room but in my soul. My first night was spent on the church steps without even a blanket, just the stars pressed cold against my bones. The next morning, I woke with little sleep and more regret, my stomach aching after just a piece of bread and half a glass of water in 20 hours. The city that once felt like home now seemed foreign. The same roads and buildings I had admired from afar now felt like walking barefoot on stones. Sitting on the sidewalk, a woman passed by and stared as if I didn't belong there. Nearby, a hotel worker asked if I would wash dishes for $3 a day, no questions, no conditions, just hard work under hot sun and clattering dishes. I accepted immediately. From afar, I saw the mall where I once shopped in style, trying on expensive clothes and buying new lipstick. Now I sat in a corner outside it, too ashamed to ask for anything, not even a prayer for help. Once, a young man threw a coin without looking. Another day, a woman gave me money and some food wrapped in bread. I thanked her quietly, then sat to eat. Suddenly, I heard a familiar voice. It was the beggar who had cursed me earlier, sitting a few steps away. I stayed silent, neither angry nor able to respond, because words had dried up inside me. Some shopkeepers eyed me suspiciously, some looked with pity, but over time, everyone's attitude became the same, outsiders and insiders alike. I began cleaning houses. One woman asked if I'd done this before. I said no, but I would learn. She was surprised by my voice, which sounded educated, and asked what happened. I said simply, times changed. I scavenged bottles from trash piles and scraps of leftover food. One day, a little boy approached and said, "Why are you sitting here? You look like a schoolteacher." I tried to smile, but my eyes welled up. I told him, "Son, everything changes. Sometimes we change ourselves, sometimes time changes us." Nights were the hardest. I found shelter in a makeshift shack with other homeless women near the park. A middle-aged woman asked my name. I replied tiredly that names didn't matter anymore, I just needed a place to stay. She said we all have pasts, but now we live in the present. Weeks passed, my body weakened, my hands blistered, and my face lost the glow it once had. Days passed cleaning hotel exteriors or shops. One day, while sweeping, I saw a face that made my heart stop. It was my brother, David. I called softly, but he looked, paused briefly, and walked on as if he hadn't heard. My broom dropped, and in that moment, I knew I was truly alone. Family, relationships, hope, all left behind. I sat every morning where I could rest after cleaning, watching the noisy traffic. Work became scarce, shopkeepers preferred familiar faces, and I was a stranger now, tired and worn. Then one day, a shiny expensive car stopped near me, a car like those I once admired from the parking lot. The window rolled down, and there he was, my husband, Mark. His face showed tiredness, wrinkles near the eyes, but those same eyes, that familiar face. Time seemed to freeze. Tears fell as I whispered, "Please forgive me, Mark. I have lost everything." He looked at me silently, no anger, no shock, just a deep, weary silence. He lowered the window and quietly said, "Come home." My legs felt weak, but a homeless man nearby said, "When fate opens a door, don't step back." With trembling steps, I got into the car, and Mark opened the back door for me. We drove in silence. The familiar house awaited, same doors and walls, but I felt fear and shame wrapping me like a cloak. Inside, everything was quiet. My sister-in-law and brother were not home, just Mark and me. He softly said the room was still the same. I lowered my head and walked in. Everything was exactly as I had left it, except for a photo of my mother resting on the corner of the bed. I lowered my eyes and sat there quietly. After a while, he came into the room carrying a plate of food and simply said, "Eat this, you need it." My hands trembled as I reached for the food, but my vision blurred, I could barely see anything. He said, "I thought I'd never see you again, but when you appeared today, I felt maybe you don't need any more punishment." I barely managed to say, "I get punished every day, on the streets, in people's eyes, in hunger, in sleeplessness, in helplessness." He was silent for a moment, then said, "I don't know why you came back or how you survived, but if a person can fall so low and still ask for forgiveness, maybe they deserve a chance to live again." The room fell silent. The food was getting cold, but something inside me began to melt. That night I spread bedding on the floor, but he told me to sleep on the bed since he would sleep on the sofa. I refused, saying I was fine there. He said it wasn't a favor, just because he still saw me as human. Tears streamed down my face, not out of complaint or blame, but gratitude. I couldn't sleep all night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if returning was my salvation or just the start of a new struggle. But one thing was clear, this was the same place I'd lost my way from, and now I had to prove myself again, not with words, but with time. The next morning, I quietly went out, washed up, and sat before a photo of my mother, silently asking for forgiveness for my foolishness, mistakes, and pride. David, standing behind me, said softly, "Nothing will change with these words now. It's time to change time." I nodded silently. For the first time, a tiny light of hope sparked inside me. I began waking up with time, living my days orderly, blending into the evenings. Though I was home, somewhere deep inside I still felt like a guest. The same bed, the same sheets, the same curtains, all the same, but now there was a silence between us that spoke volumes without words. David stopped coming home early. Earlier he'd come straight from work, but now often came late and sometimes spoke on his phone away from me. I never asked, and he never told. One day, I lightly asked what to cook. He said, "Whatever you want." Those were the things he used to love, but now they all felt ordinary to him. I cooked his favorite meals often, waiting for him, but he'd eat a few bites and leave. There was an empty room once meant for children. I often sat by its door, wondering if my fate held nothing at all. Months passed like this until one day David came home with an unusual calm on his face and a file in hand. Sitting down, he called me close and said, "I want to talk. I want to marry again and divorce you." Those words pierced my heart deeply. I asked no questions, just tears filled my eyes, and silence sank deep inside me. He said, "This isn't easy, but you know we never had kids, and I want to be a father." I just nodded, unable to speak. For the first time, he looked at me and said, "Whatever your share is, you'll get it all." What could I ask for now? I quietly said, "For a woman whose lap is empty, even walls lose meaning." He replied, "I'm not throwing you out. You'll stay here. But our relationship ends now." Inside me, everything was sharp pain, yet I only heard the sounds of breaking. That night I couldn't sleep at all, staring at the twinkling stars, my heart's courtyard darkening further. A few days later, his new wife came to the house, separate room, separate utensils, a different life. I'd make tea in the morning and set 2 cups, one for him, one for me. We exchanged just the bare minimum words. Months later, news came that she was expecting a child, not from him, but from a neighbor. When I heard, I only nodded and gently tapped the teaspoon against my cup. I didn't say a word. Back in the room meant for the child who was once my dream, I sat fixing clothes when the baby's cry came from inside. I rushed to the door but stopped and turned back. The door was closed, the crying echoed. I stood behind the door, trying to listen. David came out and saw me. He asked, "Do you want to go in?" I shook my head no. "She's a mother now, and I'm just a woman left with waiting." He said, "You can meet the baby if you want." I replied no, knowing every bond is made of blood, and my lap is empty, so I have no place here. Those days I threw myself into housework, cleaning, cooking, treating it as my destination. No one complained about me, but no one needed me either. Sometimes the child would come into the living room, I'd watch from afar. He'd smile looking at me, and I'd smile lightly back, but never approach. One day he came to me and held my finger, the warmth of his palm reached deep into my heart, and for a moment, something inside brightened. Suddenly David shouted, "Take him inside. If you bring him out, you'll fall." I bent down and held him close, my first time holding a life in my arms, though that bond wasn't mine, just a fleeting moment. Coming back inside, I looked at the photo of my mother on the wardrobe and silently said, "Did you see, Mom? The pain I ignored has returned to me in another form." That night, after everyone slept, I sat in the living room gazing at the sky. Perhaps my silence had finally completed. The world never forgave me, but time did show me a mirror. Mornings always began the same: newspaper boy outside the door, the smell of tea in the kitchen, the sound of sweeping in the living room, life going on like a machine turning on the same spot every day. David and I lived under the same roof but like strangers fulfilling only the schedule of time. He'd eat breakfast, read the paper, talk about work on the phone, then leave for the office. When he returned, only a brief hello was exchanged, no questions, no answers, just silence that we both quietly endured, until along with the broom, even my breath seemed to stop. On the old wall, thick deep lines remained, traces of innocent hands that once lit up the house with laughter, when dreams still echoed in the walls. I sat there, the broom fallen aside, looking at those lines for the first time in years, like a mother gently touching old toys. None of those marks belonged to me, and perhaps that was the harshest truth. Outside, the sounds of cars, the tea vendor's bell, the milkman's calls, and children running towards the school bus all blended into the usual chaos. Everything was the same, yet my existence was like a faint tune hidden among the noises there, but unseen. That day, I felt an unusual calmness, no urge to cry or speak, just a deep truth settled in my heart. If a woman fails to recognize herself in time, the world will know her only by her mistakes. I had become more of a housemaid than a wife in that home. When David returned in the evening, I served dinner and quietly told him I no longer wished for anything, no change in our relationship, no need to prove myself. What had passed was painful to revisit in words, and enduring the present in silence seemed easier. He looked at me silently for a moment, then said maybe I had become what I once was, quiet and wise. I smiled faintly and replied, "No, now I am the one who lives despite losing everything, and that is my greatest strength." He said nothing, just walked to his room, leaving me sitting alone, moonlight streaming through the window, the faded marks on the wall, probably worn out by time, while I was no longer weary. Silence sometimes speaks the loudest. I stood there as if someone had reopened my wounds. His words weren't harsh, they were truth, the same truth I lived every day. But when someone else voices it, it breaks something deeper inside. Returning home, I found David's new wife's son sitting there, lost in books. He smiled at me and said, "Will you sit with me today? I want to read." I nodded and sat beside him, opening the books, but my eyes saw shadows of unfinished dreams instead of words. I was reading to him, but truly, I was trying to understand that now I was part of a home where every relationship was incomplete, every place belonged to someone else, and I was only a shadow on the walls, visible but unrooted. Later, the boy said if he got good grades, I would be happy. I touched his hair and said, "I'd be very happy, son." The warmth of his hair melted my cold heart a little. Maybe this was my fate, to be a mother to someone else's child, not by name or right, but by the pure love of an innocent soul. That night, when David came home, I told myself for the first time, this house is mine. Even if I had no place in hearts, these walls knew I existed. I looked at myself in the mirror, graying hair, tired lines under my eyes, but there was something different. I had begun to endure myself. No complaints, no grievances. I no longer broke, I no longer bowed. Every morning I woke up, carrying an emptiness in my chest, making tea with it, and when the boy ran to sit by my slippers and smiled at me, it felt like a bond not made by blood but connected through heart. He started calling me Big Mom, a name neither taught nor asked for. He just said it one day, and tears welled up in my eyes. I didn't cry, only patted his head and smiled. Maybe God kept my womb empty but gave me a reason to live again through someone else's child. Teaching kids at school became my daily life. Every child looked into my eyes, listened to me, laughed at my stories, and I returned each evening learning something new. Once a girl asked, "Ma'am, don't you ever feel sad? You always smile." I looked into her innocent eyes and quietly said, "Everyone has sadness, but smiling is an art time teaches." That day I truly understood myself. I no longer broke, I taught. David said less, neither stopping nor questioning. His son spent more time with me, perhaps sensing I had more than stories. I had a mother's love silently praying for him every day. One day, he laid his head in my lap and asked, "Big Mom, when I grow up, will you come with me?" I kissed his innocent eyes and said, "If you have space in your heart, I'll always be with you, son." That night, I hardly slept. For the first time, I felt my existence was included in someone's prayers. He looked at me a moment and said, "But your eyes have peace." I smiled. Maybe it wasn't peace but fatigue learning to stay silent. That evening, sitting alone, I placed a mirror before me and saw a woman who had lost everything, regained some, and was now living holding herself together. She was no longer just a sister, nor a wife or mother, just a human who had understood a lot. That night, under an old photo of my mother, I lit a lamp and whispered softly, "I have no grievances left for anyone. Those who had to leave, did. What remains is mine, and now I live for myself." I raised my hands and prayed, not just for others, but for myself for the first time. My story is no longer punishment but a lesson, my silence is no longer a burden but a blessing. Now my life is no shadow of anyone, but my own choice. I am broken yet healed. If someone asks who I am, I say I am the one who never gave up on life, I just learned to understand it. "You were different then," she said, touching an old wound gently. I looked into her eyes. She was an elderly woman, wrinkled but clear-eyed, full of knowing. I tried to smile. "Yes, then I lived for others, now I breathe for myself." She paused, then said, "Changing isn't bad, but living broken is courage. I've seen you change slowly every day." Tears filled my eyes. I said, "Sometimes a person loses even the right to complain when their guilt is proven, even if they aren't truly guilty." She said, "Some sins change circumstances, not people. But the punishment is always borne by people." I asked softly, "Have you also been through a punishment?" She smiled, "Daughter, every woman is born carrying her share of punishment, some in relationships, some in silence, some in losing herself." I took her words to heart. The evening deepened, children returned home one by one, and I sat alone. If someone asks me who I am now, I'll say I am a woman who lost everything but found herself. That bond was neither blood nor paper, it was between sin and repentance, selfishness and regret, but most importantly, between human and God. The night I wrote my letter of sins, the moment I held David's stepson close and told him stories, a great wall fell, a wall built against hatred and the deepest pain. Now I see the prison I never understood before. When I woke up in the morning, the room seemed brighter, or maybe the darkness inside me had lessened a bit. The child who was once called just the other woman's son had now become my peace. I had been alone for so long, imprisoned by my own guilt, but when I finally began to forgive myself, life embraced me again. I was still in that house, but no longer a guest. I had become a woman who understood responsibility, forgiveness, and living for others. One evening, I took out an envelope hidden beneath the books, tore it open, and for a moment my eyes welled up, but then I smiled and burned the letter. The woman who was only guilty was no longer needed. It was time to let live the woman who had learned from her mistakes and now only wished to be a mother, whether by blood or not. That day, for the first time, I told David's son, "Son, today I will go to school with you. Let's go together." His eyes sparkled as I took his hand and started walking, leaving behind a door that now bore a new sign, "Here lives a woman who forgave herself and embraced the world again." The night was different, the air gentle as if the sky itself felt my emotions. Though the room was dark, there was a light inside my eyes, as if I had finally accepted a truth I had hidden away. I pulled out paper and pen from the closet and wrote down every suppressed truth and guilt from the depths of my heart without holding back, that I hadn't heard my mother's scream because I was lost in my own voice, that I had lost David's trust because I was tangled in my own needs, that I spent money that could have supported a life, that I broke relationships but never questioned myself. With each word, my soul grew lighter. I hid the letter under an old book. It was no confession, but a letter so that if I wasn't in this world tomorrow, at least someone would read and understand that this woman did not just hide her sins, she accepted them too. The next morning, I prayed again, not just for forgiveness, but with gratitude. "Oh God, I turned away from you, but you never left me. You placed lessons at every turn, wisdom in every wound. I thank you for keeping me alive so I could change." When David's son insisted on sleeping next to me and I embraced him without hesitation, it was not just a woman's tenderness, it was a rebirth, a new beginning born from the fire of broken relationships. One evening, sitting by my old door, I asked nothing from above, only a bond, a silent connection that survives every wound. When a faint lightning flashed in the sky and a cool breeze swept through the air, I realized my shadow was no longer one of regret but also of forgiveness. I was no longer just a character, I had become an example for those who fear sin but do not accept it, who fight with themselves but do not bow, who feel alone amidst crowds of relationships but never lose hope. That day, there were no tears, no accusations, just peace, like the first rain on a barren land. And this was not just the end of a story but the beginning of a new one. Friends, I hope you liked our story. If you did, please like the video. If you're new here, subscribe to the channel and don't forget to hit the notification bell so you get the next update first.